Welcome to the Peggy Smedley Show, your voice for our connected world, with your host, Peggy Smedley.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to today's edition of the Peggy Smedley Show. As always, I'm your host, Peggy Smedley. 3,308 lives. That is how many people were killed by distracted driving in 2022 alone. Now, if you ask me, that is far too many lives lost. Now, April is Distracted Driving Awareness Month. And here on this first segment, we're going to take a look at the history of distracted driving, because I think we need to focus on what we need to do to get us all to put our devices down when we are driving. I'm going to look back all the way to the 1960s and explore research that has been done and the progress we have made. And clearly, we have not made enough because still too many lives are lost. I'm also going to share my thoughts on the most dangerous form of distracted driving and what needs to happen next. And frankly, there's a lot more we need to do, and we can all get better. So stick around for the conversation. But before we get there, let me tell you about my guest for the show today. I'm going to be welcoming back Reddy Malati, who is the AI strategist and chief AI officer and author, as you all know, of AI Unleashed. But this time what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some really great customer case studies. We're going to look at manufacturing, pharma, and also financial transactions. And I think it's exciting when we get an opportunity to look at some really good customer cases. So stick around for that conversation. And finally, I'm going to actually welcome on the last segment, I'm going to wrap up with Amy Cox. He's the research director for the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety. Now, we're going to talk about some really important things that talk about distracted driving and what it's actually costing all of us. So stick around for these great conversations today. I think we're going to actually uncover some really important things you all want to listen to. But first, let's get talking about distracted driving. As you all know, when it comes to April, I always like to take a deep dive into what's happening on our roads, especially for all of us who continue to pick up our devices when we shouldn't when we're driving. So let's talk about what is distracted driving as an activity that takes your attention off the road. Now, for those of you who still don't really understand what it is, let's unwrap it. It could be texting on your phone, eating or drinking, and a lot of people do that, talking to other people in the vehicle. That's distracted driving, believe it or not. Or switching the stations on your radio. That is still considered a form of distracted driving when you reach over and try to touch that knob or push that button. You know, I think you need to understand anything that takes your hands off the wheel is really distracted driving. If your eyes are on the road, your hands are on the wheel, that's a distraction. You're really supposed to be focusing on the road ahead. So let's look at it like this. Journey back with me to the 1960s just for a minute. Roughly 60 years ago, there were no cell phones in cars. I mean, believe it or not, we didn't have any cell phones. We didn't have anything in our cars. In fact, we were just beginning to see the rise of audio systems being added to vehicles. I'm sure many of you who are younger can't even imagine that to be the case, but that really was the case. Around this time, Chrysler actually introduced its highway hi-fi systems, which were these mobile record players, which was really kind of cool if you think about how the evolution of things happened. And also in the 60s, the Bureau of Public Roads, which is now known as the Federal Highway Administration, did some research, which I think is really fun to look at. It sent scientist John Senders on the roads blindfolded, kind of. Now, not really blindfolded, but you'll get my idea when I explain this to you. He was actually wearing a motorcycle helmet, which with a sandblasted opaque shield. Now, this was the idea that he had. Now, I want you to think about this. The shield was kind of rigged to censor that periodically it flipped it down over his eyes. Now, this was the idea. When the visor was down, he could kind of see anything until he triggered it to lift again at a fraction of a second. Now, that was the goal. Now, what did he find in his research? Now, this was the idea.
World and into this kind of business is the unusually permissive atmosphere and the interest in ideas. But their work isn't all desk work, as shown by this experiment on the attention span needed for safe driving. The experimenter is against director, psychologist John Senders.
Driving along a section of Route 128, and I'm trying to get an estimate of the demand driver by this particular section of road. The speed of the car is constant, and as the road varies from moment to moment in the demand that it makes upon me, I must look more often or less often, as the case may be. The visor completely occludes my view during the period that it's down, and I must rely on some stored image or memory of what the road was before the visor went down. The half-second look that I have is enough to restore all the information that I should need in order to drive down the road. The records that we get of the time between looks at the road give us a direct measure of the difficulty presented to the driver by the road from moment to moment as we drive down it. The shorter the interval between looks, the more difficult that segment of road is to drive. On those periods, as you saw, where the interval was very long, the road was indeed easy. The interval then gives us a direct and quantitative measure of this rather elusive thing called difficulty.
There were many different types of distraction, and his vision is a huge part of attentional demand. And this is what he was looking for. In fact, he won an Ig Nobel Prize in Public Safety in 2011 for his study and the intentional demand of automobile driving. So in the 1990s, cell phones came on the scene. So by 1997, the CTIA reported that there were more than 50 million cellular customers in the United States. That same year, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration launched one of its first studies on driving with cell phones. So if you're journeying with me, you kind of get the sequence of everything that's been happening. So John Sender started this research that Chrysler was doing. Then we started to see the evolution of the report that CTIA did with all these cellular phones. And now the National Safety did their study. And now you find out that among those surveyed that we have here, 9 out of 10 cellular telephone owners reported using them while driving. Now we're journeying down this crazy path, and in the early 2000s, distracted driving fatalities began to increase like you can't imagine. I mean, and it tells us, because fatalities from distracted driving soared this whopping 28% after 2005. Well, it clearly indicates every time we had a cell phone in a car, it led to something that we don't want to know about. Somebody's losing their life because people are distracted when they're behind the vehicle. So rising from 4,572 fatalities to 5,870 in 2008. Think about how many people are dying. That's because we're distracted. And I just described to you all the different ways of being distracted. Not just cell phones, it's all, but cell phones clearly was a big soaring reason why all this was happening. So at that time, we hit this precipice. Now, it was this time finally some people started to say, oh my gosh, we got to get a clue here. What the heck is going on? And they started to say, enough is enough. We're starting to lose too many lives. Ridiculous things are going on. So people said, okay, we got to stop this. What are we going to do? In fact, it really was kind of an interesting, sad story here that I'm going to share with you. Finally, Mother Shelley Forno was on her way home from the doctor's appointment, and she found all these fire trucks and ambulances near her house. And she ran out to try to figure out what was going on. And sadly, I mean, this is where the story gets really heartbreaking, to find her 9-year-old daughter, Erica, lying on the road. And this innocent girl had been riding her bike home, and she was hit by an SUV that had drifted off into the bike lane. And the investigation of the accident later found out, it had revealed that the driver had been talking on her cell phone at the time of the accident. No surprise there. You're talking on your cell phone, you're not paying attention. The car drifted off, the SUV drifted off and hit this 9-year-old on her bike. Well, Forney's story hit the news. And then, of course, she had a meeting with U.S. Representative Betsy Markey. After that meeting, Markey submitted a congressional resolution to designate April as National Distracted Driving Awareness Month. Congress passed that in March in 2010, and that was the resolution. So now, it is a way to explore the dangers of distracted driving, and it's continued ever since. In my humble opinion, texting is one of the most, let me reiterate, the most dangerous forms of distraction in the vehicle today. Absolutely. And it saddens me to think that people think they can text and drive and that they can multitask. And here's why. There are many different types of distraction in the vehicle. Visual takes your eyes off the road. Manual takes your hands off the wheel. Cognitive takes your mind off the task of driving. But texting involves all three of them. So sending or reading a text takes your eyes off the road, hands off the wheel, and mind off the task of driving for at least 5 seconds. Now, let's be honest. Many people are texting for more than 5 seconds. I don't care what you say. It's taking you more than 5 seconds to send that text. But let's take that example of texting of 5 seconds, because I just wanted you to take this example with me. At 55 miles an hour, that's like driving the length of an entire football field with your eyes closed. And most people think they can do it. They're superheroes. But you're not. If you're sitting at your desk right now, I want you to take this test with me. I want you to try something. I really want you to do this. Close your eyes and count for 5 seconds. Close your eyes right now. Count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Imagine the entire football field going by you. Imagine the cars, the pedestrians you are driving by. I'm confident it will inspire you right now to put down your device the next time you get in your car. How long did that feel? It's incredibly sad to think you can drive with your eyes closed for that long. I can tell you, if you are in a car and you've been at have that feeling you were so close but you didn't, you will not text again. You don't ever want to be the one that was in an accident that ended up doing something tragic. But the feeling of that you came so close, you'll never do it again. But if that wasn't enough to convince you, let's talk about the data. I'm always about the data. And the data, I think, is a compelling story. Even though I don't think we have the full numbers yet, the percent of drivers manipulating handheld electronic devices is 82%. And again, I don't think we have all the real data, but that is an 82% increase from 1.7%, in 2013 to 3.1% from 2022. Those numbers just keep moving. It's moving all the time. Perhaps if there's any good of all of this, maybe if I bring myself down because I'm emotional right now, the total number of fatal, distracted, affected crashes decreased from 5% in 2022 compared to 2021. Yeah, that doesn't do me any good in that sense, because I still believe the numbers are unreported because people don't want to admit when they were in a car crash that they were using their phone. But this is the data we have right now. So if we are going by the data, we are making some progress getting drivers to put down their devices. But the fact still remains it's not enough. Distracted affected crashes increased 4% since 2013. There's still a lot of education and work that needs to be done. Which brings me to my opinion for today. Distracted driving is a killer. It's a killer, and far too many lives are lost. Our loved ones are dying because people are driving distracted. We need to put the phones and other electronic devices away when we are behind the wheel of a vehicle. Driving is serious business. Lives are at stake. We need to demand others to understand what is happening when they look at their phones, even for a couple seconds. We need to be good role models for our children and for those in the vehicle with us. We need to make better decisions when we understand that this is Distracted Driving Awareness Month. And all year long, it isn't just 1 month, but we're raising awareness right now. We're ringing the bell for the month of April. So here's my tip. Here's my tip right now. Consider the role you play this month and always. Lead by example. Lead by example. Parents, you need to lead by example. Friends, you need to encourage other friends to not drive distracted. Employers need to create policies and procedures to demand better and safer roads. Think about all the construction workers out there that when people are distracted, they drive into those construction zones and lives are lost. Encourage workers to keep their hands on the wheel and their eyes on the road. We all need to be responsible. We have a responsibility to play here. So I ask you, what role will you play to help stop distracted driving? Are you creating new innovation? Maybe that's it. Play a role in creating new innovation to help us all be more responsible when we are behind the wheel. What can you do to help us all minimize distracted driving? Or at a minimum, are you stopping from texting and driving today? So I ask again, what will you do this Distracted Driving Awareness Month? I hope you will encourage, or you yourself will stop being distracted when you're behind the wheel. If I've stopped one of you from being a distracted driver, I've done my job in our radio show today. All right, listeners, I'm out of time for this first segment. Share your thoughts with me on X at Connected World or follow me in LinkedIn. Continue the conversation. I hope you'll encourage others to listen to our show or encourage others to drive safely when they're behind the wheel. Please check out our website at connectedworld.com or our show website at thepeggy.smedleyshow.com. Make sure to share and subscribe to our episodes each week. Don't go away. We've got more to come as always. This is the Peggy Smedley Show, your voice for our connected world. And remember, with great technology comes great responsibility.